At just 25 years old, one man had already crushed the largest empire on earth. By 30, he ruled more land than anyone in history before him. He was never defeated in battle, not once. How did a young king from a small kingdom conquer the known world? Using an army that was often outnumbered, far from home, and constantly on the edge of collapse? The answer isn't just courage, it's strategy. And once you understand how Alexander the Great fought his wars, you'll realize history never stood a chance. But that's not even the most shocking part. Alexander didn't win because he had the biggest army. He didn't win because he had the best weapons. He won because he thought differently. While other generals followed tradition, Alexander broke it. While kings fought defensively, Alexander attacked psychology itself. Every battle was calculated. Every move was deliberate. Every victory was part of a larger plan. This isn't just the story of conquest. It's the story of how strategy can bend reality, and by the end of this journey, you'll understand why military academies still study a man who lived over 2,300 years ago. Alexander was born in 356 BC in the kingdom of Macedon, not an empire, not a superpower, just a rough land north of Greece, often looked down upon. But Alexander wasn't raised like an ordinary prince. His father, King Philip II, was already a military genius. He transformed Macedon's army into a killing machine, and from childhood, Alexander watched everything. At 13, his tutor became Aristotle. Yes, that Aristotle, the greatest philosopher of the ancient world. Alexander didn't just study warfare. He studied logic, geography, politics, human nature. By the time he was 16, he was commanding troops. By 18, he led cavalry at the Battle of Chaeronea, helping his father crush the combined armies of Greece. He learned early that battles aren't won by strength alone. They're won by timing, position, and fear. And then, at 20 years old, Philip was assassinated. Overnight, Alexander became king, surrounded by enemies, threatened by rebellion, considered too young to rule. Most kings would defend their borders. Alexander chose something far more dangerous. He went on the offensive, but that's just the opening move. The Greek city-states rebelled the moment Philip died. They believed Alexander was weak, inexperienced, replaceable. Alexander responded with speed. He marched south faster than anyone expected. Before Greece could organize, he was already there. One city resisted, Thebes. Alexander didn't negotiate. He made an example. The city was destroyed, its population enslaved, only temples were spared. The message was clear: rebel, and you disappear. This wasn't cruelty without purpose. It was strategy. Alexander understood something critical. Fear travels faster than armies. After Thebes fell, Greece surrendered without a fight. Alexander had secured his rear: no distractions, no rebellions. Now he could focus on the real target, the Persian Empire, the largest, richest empire the world had ever seen. And Alexander was about to challenge it with an army one-third its size. Which raises a dangerous question. Why did he think he could win? Alexander inherited one of history's deadliest tools, the Macedonian phalanx, but he didn't just use it. He perfected it. The phalanx was a wall of soldiers armed with 18-foot-long spears. Individually, they were vulnerable. Together, they were unstoppable. Enemies couldn't get close, couldn't break through, couldn't breathe. But Alexander knew something crucial. A wall alone doesn't win wars. So he combined it with speed. While the phalanx fixed the enemy in place, Alexander led the cavalry himself. Not from the back, not from a safe position. From the front. He watched for the smallest weakness. A gap, a hesitation, a misstep. And then he struck like lightning. This combination, anvil and hammer, was devastating. The phalanx held, Alexander crushed. But that's not the craziest part. He used this same core idea in every battle and adapted it every time. In 333 BC, Alexander faced King Darius III of Persia at the Battle of Issus. Darius had everything Alexander didn't: a massive army, superior numbers, endless resources. Alexander had around 40,000 men. Darius had over 100,000. On open ground, Alexander would be destroyed. So he chose the battlefield. Issus was narrow, mountains on one side, the sea on the other. Darius couldn't use his numbers. Alexander forced the giant into a hallway. Then the battle began. The phalanx advanced. Persian troops pushed back. Chaos erupted. And then Alexander saw it. a gap near Darius himself. He didn't hesitate. He charged directly at the Persian king. Not at the army, at the mind of the army. Darius panicked. He turned his chariot and fled. The moment the king ran, the army collapsed. Alexander didn't just defeat Persia. He shattered its confidence. But that victory created a new problem. Alexander was now deep in enemy territory, surrounded by enemies, far from home, and the war was just beginning. Alexander didn't just conquer cities. He conquered beliefs. When cities surrendered, he spared them. When they resisted, he destroyed them. This unpredictability was intentional. No one knew how Alexander would react. Fear kept doors open. He also adopted Persian customs, dressed like Persian royalty, kept local leaders in power. Why? Because ruling is harder than conquering. Alexander didn't want endless rebellions. He wanted loyalty. By blending cultures, he turned enemies into allies. But there was tension. His own soldiers hated it. They believed Alexander was becoming Persian. The army was winning battles, but slowly losing unity. And then came the most daring move of his career. A place even Persians believed was untouchable. The Persian capital of Persepolis was protected by mountains, steep paths, harsh terrain. Defenders believed no army could cross it in winter. Alexander disagreed. He led his army through snow-covered passes. Men froze. Horses died. Supplies ran thin. But he kept going. When they emerged, the defenders were unprepared. Persepolis fell. The heart of the Persian Empire was captured. Alexander had done the impossible. But then, something strange happened. The city was burned. Some say by accident. Some say by revenge. Some say by design. The symbol of Persian power was erased. Alexander wasn't just winning wars. He was rewriting history. Yet his greatest challenges were still ahead. Because now, he believed he was unstoppable. And that belief can be dangerous. As Alexander pushed east, his enemies changed. Persian armies fought traditionally. But in Central Asia and India, he faced guerrilla tactics, ambushes, hit-and-run attacks, unfamiliar terrain. Many generals would fail. Alexander adapted. He split his forces, used local guides, changed formations. At the Battle of Hydaspes, he faced war elephants, something his army had never seen. Instead of panicking, Alexander adjusted. He targeted the handlers, forced chaos, turned fear back on the enemy. Once again, victory followed. But the cost was heavy. His army was exhausted, homesick, broken. When Alexander wanted to march further east, his men refused. For the first time, Alexander stopped, not because he was defeated, but because even legends have limits. Alexander died at 32 years old. No heir, no clear successor. His empire collapsed almost immediately. So was it all for nothing? Not even close. Alexander changed warfare forever. He proved strategy beats size. Speed beats strength. Psychology beats steel. His campaigns are still taught today. His tactics still studied. His mindset still admired. He wasn't just a conqueror. He was a system breaker. A man who looked at the world as it was and refused to accept its limits. And maybe that's the real reason Alexander the Great still haunts history. Because he reminds us of an uncomfortable truth. The world doesn't belong to the strongest. It belongs to those bold enough to rethink it. And once someone does, nothing is ever the same again.